I bought my first two rental houses when I was 18.
It didn't cost us too much to do that screening.
Later on, just did what Keith has done.
We had that on a couple of my properties.
What I would say to the younger folks that are just beginning renting.
Well, hello, Gateway Education Nation. It's Keith Weinhold here. I'm sitting here with Roy Briley, an experienced property manager. He owns his own property management company and a number of other companies in both the real estate space, the insurance space, and more. And interestingly, he owns the company that manages many of my properties. And Roy has been in property management since 1979, so more than 4 decades of contribution.
Which means I'm an old guy. I'm 65 years old, so born in 1955, so I've been around for a while.
Sounds to me like you're just in your prime. So, Roy, investors are typically interested in increasing the net operating income, increasing the cash flow. What are some of the best ways over time you found to do that?
Well, when we take over a property, the first thing we do is we go in and inspect each one of the units, walk the property, and we always talk to people first about what I call the shell. So start with the outside of the property when you first pull up, and look at the landscaping, look at the exterior paint, all the things that your tenant's going to see, so they decide, especially if you're talking about a building that's multi-unit, maybe 4, 6, 8, 10 units, they're going to want to get a feeling that the outside presents well. That can mean broken windows, people have foreign objects on outside decks that make them feel unsafe, barbecues that could cause a fire, just different things that could impact them that you feel like you wouldn't want to deal with. So when you come into a property yourself, if you were going to put your daughter in there or move in yourself, how would you feel about it? So the exterior is critical. The rest of the shell to me would be walking the hallways to see how it feels. Sometimes you'll set rules where they can't put their shoes outside their door because the hallways can look like just this big collection pot of all kinds of stacked shoes and everything. That's a decision that you would want to make. Depends on the community you're in and whether people even take their shoes off or not. So that would be the hallways. Make sure it's painted properly. The light switch covers are not busted. Just things that create a general sense of pride in the building so that the tenants that look to rent the property feel like it's a good place for them to live. And then once they get inside of the unit, it's a certain amount of common sense. Depends on where you're renting, what the average rents are in the market area. But you want to have the property in suitable condition equal to what the tenant's expectations are going to be in that building. If it's a $900 rental in a fourplex, it might be just no tears in the countertops. It could be very basic countertops. The carpet could just be satisfactory, has maybe a small stain that wasn't taken out. And then as you get up in the higher rents, the tenant is gonna expect more. And we always recommend that you're in the aggregate, kind of in the middle area. Sometimes if you purchased a building and you know it needs some work, then as you get time, you take care of that. What I would say to the younger folks that are just beginning renting, I bought my first 2 rental houses when I was 18. And then later on just did what Keith has done, which is bought more and more units, did some 1031s and got to where I owned substantially more units, as well as owning a company that manages a little over 500 doors right now. A lot of it's just you personally taking pride in the way you live your life and the way you live at your home and making sure that extends to your investment. So whether it's a third party like myself that manages it, are they getting the grass cut routinely? Are they throwing some fertilizer on it if it needs to keep the lawn greened up, if you're allowed to do that in the area you're in? Whatever it is that's suitable to the area and community that shows pride and ownership is what you're really looking for, and that's how you're going to first get the best rents for the property. Some of the stuff we've done when you've turned a property, let's say you go into a property, you buy it, and you have a bad tenant mix, so you've got some, and I've done that many times. So you're looking at the cost of turning the tenants over.
Because we had that on a couple of my properties where I inherited one with a not so great tenant mix.
Exactly right. Keith had one of his bigger units that had about 50% were tenants that were not the tenants you'd normally want in there. So what we started doing is we'd put them up for rent, and we wouldn't rent them with 1-year leases until we felt the building had settled down. So if we got a tenant, sometimes the tenant, this sounds really bad, but if you get a tenant who's okay with your building and your building's not good and the tenant mix is not good, that's probably not a tenant you want in there, right? They've looked at it, they see a bunch of people standing in the hallways smoking, they're not supposed to smoke inside the building, whatever misbehavior they're doing, and the tenant that will take that property is probably not a great tenant.
If that's a standard they would accept, that's not who you want.
Exactly right. So that's what we've done with some of the buildings is we advertise it as a 1-year lease, and then we get ready to sign. We just say, you know what, we'd like to do a month to month if you're okay, and they're usually very happy with that. And the fact that we advertise as a 1-year lease keeps everybody that wants a 30-day rental from showing up. Then when they do show up, they sign, they'll get ready to sign. We say, let's just do month to month. And then instead of having to give them the notice to vacate that's 7 days you didn't pay on time, or a 10-day notice because of a lease violation, all you do is a non-renewal, and it's much easier to turn the tenant. And sometimes the owner of the building, and it might be you, can't afford, you buy a 12-plex, you can't afford to kick out 8 bad tenants and then go in, and maybe you'd have to put $10,000 in every door to fix them up. So it's a process bringing the building up, and it's something that I've done many times. But when you get with a property manager that's going to do that, you really have to have a plan. You want to talk to the property manager, see what type of experience they have. And I can tell you, it is tough to find a good property manager. And when you do get one, do what Keith does, which is stay in touch. He checks his own properties occasionally, sends us an email. He always starts out with the what I call the compliment sandwich. You start off saying something, hey, thanks a lot, you guys are working hard, doing a good job in my buildings, but I found a broken light switch on the second floor, and someone had a barbecue on the deck, or whatever he says, and then he ends with the compliment sandwich. Thanks again, guys. I really appreciate that you had the front door painted, or whatever we did.
Even with a property manager, I can make up something good to say sometimes.
There you go.
Yeah,
exactly right.
So, Roy, you've been talking to us about some improvements which cost an investor money, and other improvements that really don't cost anything at all. Are there some common mistakes out there that you see investors making when they over-improve properties, or where they're spending money where they really don't get much bang for their buck, where they should not make those investments?
Sometimes you do that, and then afterwards you realize that you did it
later,
and you wish you wouldn't had. Hopefully the person that you're working with has enough experience that if they start to kind of push back on you a little bit, and I think anytime you hire someone, I own a mortgage company, real estate brokerage, I've got 7 companies, 53 employees, and my employees are all empowered, and I like them to push back on me and say, no, I think this might work better, and that includes that department. So if you have a property manager that you're comfortable with, you should allow them to kind of say, hang on a minute, here's what I'm thinking. Because if you hired the right property manager, he's probably got a bigger brain than you do when it comes to property management. That's just how I usually tell my staff that when I come in and they present me with a problem. I always say, you guys have a bigger brain than I do in this particular company, and tell me what you think, and I want to hear their input. So listen to the property manager. They may have some ideas for you. We just had a conversation, Keith and I did. We did our annual review on his 2 big buildings he has here in Alaska, and we talked about putting luxury vinyl planking in some more of the units. Do we put it in the basement units, the upstairs units? Will it be a noise transference, and so on? And at the end of the day, we decided that, it's really fun to do it. It looks cool. It's a great investment moving forward because it'll last a very long time, but it's a big capital expense. It can be 3 or 4 times as much money as just putting in the other carpet, and you really don't get very much more rent out of it.
I wouldn't get a good cash-on-cash return on that particular investment. Just looking at the investment in one box, this is what I would cost to put the planks in, this is how much it would increase the rent, it wasn't worth it.
Exactly. And so that's what you do. Sometimes you look at your building and you get excited and you just want to put new windows in it, and then you ask yourself, if I put new windows in it, it will look prettier, I guess. They'll be vinyl instead of wood, or whatever my older building has, but really, what's that going to do to my heat? Is it going to save me as much as the cost of the windows? Highly unlikely. So and again, it depends on where you're at. If you're in Palm Beach, Florida, and the rents are $5,000 a month, you're going to be in a different category than just regular rentals in certain market areas. So you just want to manage the property to the expectations of the aggregate group of people that are going to rent it from you, if that makes any sense. That's how I would look at it. And then one other thing. I think when you talk about stuff that's cheap to do, is the stuff I talked about with pride of ownership, where you're going over and noticing that they're storing their garbage cans out front, and you go tap on the door and you politely tell the tenant, listen, I'd like you to pull the garbage cans around and put them out of view where we've got a blocked off space to do that. We had a case Keith and I did where we looked at one of his nice properties that sits on a half-acre of beautiful land, and the kids would take their toys out in front and they'd be strung all over the place, and so he authorized it, and we built a really nice wooden fence, and Keith just reported in to me and said they're all using it. And so they just put behind the wooden fence, it's not like a fenced yard, it's just a screening fence. It's maybe what, 20 feet or something, 30 feet.
Yeah, and that way kids could put all their bicycles and their other play toys and things like that behind the screen. Otherwise, when you show up at the building, things would just be strewn all over the place.
Exactly.
It didn't cost us too much to do that screening and increase the curb appeal substantially. And that makes me think about new incoming tenants. When we're advertising for a vacant unit, that's the first thing that
Yep.
they see.
Yep.
So that can be really important.
He's freaking awesome. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Well, so does Roy, because property management is such a difficult endeavor to be in. I was joking with Roy about how it's just like being the NBA referee or the Major League Baseball umpire, because if everything goes great, those people don't get any recognition, but when things go poorly, that's when they get the blowback. And Roy has been doing it for more than 4 decades, so thanks for all the great tips, Roy. For Roy Briley, I'm Keith Weinhold. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Since 2014, the powerful Get Rich Education podcast has created more passive income for people than nearly any other show in the world. This show teaches you how to earn strong returns from passive real estate investing in the best markets without losing your time being a flipper or landlord. Show host Keith Weinhold writes for Forbes and delivers a new show every week. Since 2014, there's been millions of listener downloads in 188 world nations. He has A-list show guests include top-selling personal finance author Robert Kiyosaki. Get Rich Education can be heard on every podcast platform, plus it has its own dedicated Apple and Android listener phone apps. Build wealth on the go with the Get Rich Education podcast. Sign up now for the Get Rich Education podcast or visit GetRichEducation.com.